All right. Everything seems to be working. Let me just double check real quick. Yeah, it looks like we are live. Um, my laptop's already overheating. It's a great day, right? Today we're going to talk about Schopenhauer. I was going to talk about Aragorn and some of the Lord of the Rings characters, but I need to find good videos for that. Um, that's something I said I was going to do as I was reading them, and I guess I just got sidetracked. But yeah, um, if you don't know Schopenhauer, he's pretty interesting. I can sum up his beliefs very broadly. Um, there's two main ideas. There's the will to live. So the will to live is the idea that basically human beings have this like compelling force that drives them to act against their own self-interest. And it's something that we're all plagued with because it's the innate need to survive. So think of somebody that will sell out one of their friends for a tiny amount of gain, but it really isn't their number one benefit because they sold out a friend that would have had their back. So it's like people that self-sabotage, people that act in their own self-interest, even if it doesn't make sense. This is what Schopenhauer called the will to live. Think of somebody who has like a beautiful girlfriend and cheats on her. Like it's like dumb stuff like that that ruins their own lives for the sake of no sort of idea of things. And think it's really about the expansion of power, the expansion of control, the expansion of security. That's really what's driving it. And this is, I'll juxtapose the will to live with Nietzsche's will to power. Nietzsche's will to power is like the next step. So the will to live is just your survival instinct, where the will to power is your survival instinct plus your need to control everything, your need to exact your will. That sort of idea. What's up, El Divo or Divo?
Transcripts of our videos, as well as galleries of the art we use in the videos by visiting academyofideas.com. There is some wisdom in taking a gloomy view, in looking upon the world as a kind of hell, and in confining one's efforts to securing a little room that shall not be exposed to the fire.
Schopenhauer is weird because he's a pessimist in one sense, but he isn't in the other. It reminds me a lot of Camus, where it's like the idea of there's no inherent meaning you can find in life, and that's what gives life meaning. It's that sort of idea about things.
At the age of 21, the philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche was browsing a bookstore when he stumbled upon Arthur Schopenhauer's philosophical treatise.
If you read a lot of Nietzsche's early works, it's purely this guy's words recited, basically.
The World as Will and Representation. The chance discovery of this book would radically change Nietzsche's life, or as he wrote, I don't know what demon whispered to me, take this book home. Back at home, I threw myself into the corner of a sofa with my new treasure, and began to let that dynamic, dismal genius work on me. Nietzsche was not the only great thinker influenced by Schopenhauer.
Jung was influenced, Freud was influenced heavily by Schopenhauer. Honestly, a lot of I don't know if Freud does this in his later writings, but the interpretations of dreams cites Faust, Schopenhauer, and Nietzsche a lot.
At an early age. In his late teenage years, Carl Jung searched for thinkers who could satisfy his intense thirst for knowledge, and in his autobiography, Memories, Dreams, and Reflections, he wrote that the great find resulting from my researches was Schopenhauer. He was the first to speak of the suffering of the world, which visibly and glaringly surrounds us, and of confusion, passion, evil. Here at last was a philosopher who had the courage to see that all was not for the best in the fundaments of the universe. He spoke neither of the all good and all wise providence of a creator, nor of the harmony of the cosmos, but stated bluntly that a fundamental flaw underlay the sorrowful course of human history and the cruelty of nature.
So think about like Schopenhauer is the philosopher for the person that again, there's definitely people that read Schopenhauer and become self-loathing, but I think the real intention is to just recognize the reality of things. Have you ever been in a room with your HR and they're firing you and they're like, well, I hope you have a good life. It's like you're the one ruining my life right now. Like it's like the sugarcoating of stuff, I think, and people that are against the sugarcoating of words and reality is going to be a fan of Schopenhauer.
In this video, we
There's
explore
like a
Schopenhauer's
rawness to it.
pessimistic view of the world and his thoughts on how to respond to the sufferings and evils of life. Subject to the limitation of human knowledge, my philosophy is the real solution of the enigma of the world, wrote Schopenhauer. Schopenhauer's philosophical goal was a lofty one. In his words, he wanted to lay bare the true nature of the world by obtaining knowledge of the ultimate and foundational reality underlying all phenomena. This transcendental reality, which is posited to exist beyond
Schopenhauer was very much influenced by Eastern philosophy. You wouldn't know on the surface, but the more you dig into his ideas, the more it kind of is apparent.
space and time and to eternally underwrite all that exists, is often referred to by philosophers as the ground of being. The reason Schopenhauer wanted to uncover the true nature of reality is because he thought that in doing so, he could understand why our world is full of so much misery and evil, or as he wrote, not merely that the world exists, but still more that it is such a miserable and melancholy world is the tormenting problem of metaphysics.
So Schopenhauer, when he talks about like
The problem that
the nature of things, it's it's the idea that how do I say this? That there's something beyond the way we're seeing things, and there's something that's causing this, and when we get to the root of it, then we'll understand how we can go differently.
confronts us when we tackle metaphysical questions is that our experience of the world is confined to our sense perceptions. When we perceive a tree, a bird, a mountain, or another human being, we see only outer appearances and not the inner essence or foundational reality that manifests them. Our perceptions, in other words, cannot penetrate beyond the surface of things. Because of this problem, the philosopher Immanuel Kant proposed that it is impossible for us to arrive at knowledge of the true nature of reality, or in his terminology, we cannot obtain knowledge of things in themselves.
This is just repeating Plato. I don't get why a lot of people are credited with these ideas. Like Bertrand Russell, really just the idea that things are subjective is just Plato's idea of forms. Like I don't really see a difference. It's the same thing with crediting Schopenhauer and Nietzsche both with the will to live and the will to power. Like it doesn't. I don't really see a difference in a lot of these ideas. I think a lot of these ideas overlap, and it's like I mean, think of it like intellectual property. Like Disney has Marvel, Warner Brothers has Superman and Batman and DC. But like when you boil it down, there's very, very similar stories. It's just done in different ways. And I think that's really philosophy's problem is that it tries to be different, but it ends up being the same. I mean, a great poet is a great poet. They all sound the same. You can't really differentiate William Blake, Khalil Gibran, Rumi. They all kind of say congruent things, and you take it out of context. You're like, is that a Rumi quote? Or is that a William Blake quote? Or is that a Gibran quote? It's very weird.
What things may be in themselves, I know not, because a thing is never presented to me otherwise than as an appearance, explained Kant in Critique of Pure Reason, or as Roger Scruton wrote in Kant, A Brief Insight. How can I know the world as it is? I can have knowledge of the world as it seems, since that is merely knowledge of my present perceptions.
Okay, so this is not the right way to describe it. The right way to describe it is what you see is not precisely what is. And this goes back to Plato versus Aristotle. So Aristotle, his belief was that everything is purely how you observe it. But we know this isn't true because color doesn't really exist. It's the atoms vibrating at a certain frequency to give the color of appearance. So in fact, there's more than our mind can comprehend. Can you see magnets? Can you understand magnetism with your eyes? Yeah, we know it exists. So it's like there's forces beyond our control, and there's things altering the world beyond our control that are inobservable and we'll never be able to understand. Like, this is the entire idea of string theory, and how many billions of dollars were dropped into that so that nothing could come of it. And it's like it's all in pursuit of this Aristotelian idea that we can understand things that are apparent, are there. But the truth is, nothing will ever be perfect. No observation tool can ever observe anything to the most precise degree. And that's really what this conversation comes down to. I don't know why they're giving this to Kant. Perhaps it's because Kant influenced Schopenhauer so strongly. But I think Schopenhauer's definition is much, much better.
But can I have knowledge of the world that is not just knowledge of how it seems? to put the question in slightly more general form, can I have knowledge of the world that is not just knowledge of my own point of view? According to Schopenhauer, Kant's error lay in the fact that he overlooked that there is one object in the world whose inner nature we directly experience, that being ourselves. When we look at ourselves in a mirror, we perceive our body in the same way we perceive other objects, as a
Again, this
mere
is just
appearance.
this
But
it
we also
really is just Bertrand Russell. This is what this sounds like to me. Like the biased observer, the person that cannot see beyond themselves and thinks that the entire world views the world as they do. And really think about like differences in opinions, think about differences in experiences. And, I like think of somebody that you vehemently disagree with on everything. Do you think that person's a bad person, or do you think they've lived a different life and experienced different things and seen different things, and that's why they are that way? And I think these are interesting questions that we need to start asking ourselves, especially as the world becomes more divided. Because, you know, uh, I'll give you a little simple life hack here. If you're judging others, if you're trying to bring down others, it purely means that you don't feel good about yourself. As Jesus said, he who hath no sin casts the first stone. Any judgment you level towards others is self-hatred, self-judgment, and a completely healthy mind, completely healthy person doesn't need to do those things. And I think through this understanding of perspective, this understanding of the Platonic ideal forms, I think there's a big opportunity for transformation there by just simply observing, you know what? If I understood this person's entire worldview, if I understood this person's entire experience and everything they'd seen in their entire life, I might be the same person as them. And when you do that, it's a lot easier to forgive. It's a lot easier to get over things. The greatest revenge on somebody is forgiveness. Think about like it's been a while since I've like felt the need to get revenge or I've felt the need to get back at someone but like think of those like childish relationships, whether it's you, whether it's your friend, they're like, I'm gonna get back at this person. I'm gonna make them jealous. It's like that the other person won. If you're thinking about them that much and giving that much emotion and that much attention to someone after they've left your life, they won. The only way to move on, the only way to get revenge is to forgive. Accept it. It is what it is. And just don't give your energy anymore. The only thing that you can give someone is your attention. And what is emotion? What is energy? What is time? It's your attention. That's the only thing you have in this world that matters. That's the only thing in this world that you can make something of yourself with. That's the only thing that you could give someone that no one else could give. No one else can give your attention to anyone else. Only you can give it to yourself. That's the greatest gift you can give. And it's so weird how so many people linger in these, just negative states.
to experience our mind and body from within, and this experience, in the words of Schopenhauer, is infinitely more familiar and more intimate than anything else. To obtain knowledge of the true nature of reality, we should therefore direct our focus inward and explore the nature of our inner reality, or as Schopenhauer wrote, on the path of objective knowledge, we shall never get beyond appearances. We shall therefore remain at the outside of things. We shall never be able to penetrate into their inner nature and investigate what they are in themselves. So far, I agree with Kant. But we ourselves are the thing in itself. Consequently, away from within
The whole world is you pushed out. Think of it that way. Everything you observe is how you observe it through your perception, how you observe it through your self-definition. Um, that's really what he's trying to say here.
stands open to us to that real inner nature of things to which we cannot penetrate from without. It is, so to speak, a subterranean passage, which places us at once within the fortress which it was impossible to take by assault from without.
I think he was really inspired by Spinoza, as well as the Gita and the Upanishads. I think that's how you say it. But basically, he's taking the stance. He's not saying it because he doesn't. This is the problem with a lot of philosophers is that they have a lot of out there ideas and they have to code it with acceptable speak. They can't be too out there. They can't be too insane. Um, where you end up like Giordano Bruno. But basically, what he's trying to say is that everyone's connected and everyone is the expression of one universal light, one universal soul. Think of Emerson's Oversoul. Think of, um, even the Big Bang Theory is this monad, this idea that everything is an expression of the same substance, the same source. Isn't it ironic how the Big Bang Theory is really just a atheistic spirit, atheistic interpretation of the monad.
When we look within, what we discover is that our inner nature is characterized by what Schopenhauer called an endless striving. We want, need, wish, long, and yearn for one thing after the other. Whether conscious or unconscious, desiring and striving constitute the essence of our being.
This is what he's talking about, the will to live. This endless striving is like the need to be proactive. So think about when you solve a problem at work, you're done for the day, you have 30 minutes left and you pretend to be busy. It's that need to have something to do. It's that need to prepare for the next thing. It's that need and that anxiety and that fight or flight that's triggered that is really the biggest detrimental force in our lives.
Lies at the foundation of all our actions, and according to Schopenhauer, all our desires exist in the service of two ends survival and reproduction. Our drive to survive spawns the
So this is this is something that you see coming to its head today. I feel like there's not really the need for survival and there's not really the need for reproduction because we have it. So think of ambition this way. So like if you go conquer a country, this is the Caesar mindset or this is the Napoleon mindset, your name is forever in the history books. So you're leaving a legacy, you're reproducing your name for centuries and centuries and centuries, and hopefully you're leaving something that's going to last longer than you. That's the fountain of youth. That's the secret to immortality. That's the secret to, you know, it's not just passing down your genes because your genes could be, you could have a kid that doesn't have kids. You could, something could happen. Your family could get taken out, but it's the need to reproduce that name that humanity really seeks. And it's weird because I feel like, I mean, you could see it nowadays in how many people that want to be influencers, how many people that want to be famous for the sake of being famous. Like it's weird to me. Like I don't know if you notice this, but like think about the people on Love Island. Like those are people that are like, and again, not all of them. There's probably some decent people on it, but like those are people that are just like I should be famous because I should be like the Kardashians. Why are they famous? Obviously, there's the sex tape with Ray J, but like aside from that, it's like why should we pay attention to people that really don't offer anything, that really aren't insightful, that really aren't interesting? And it's like that arrogance that everyone should know my name because I didn't do anything. Because obviously, I think there's some fame and notoriety that's attached to great achievements. Like you can't be a tremendous writer and not get some sort of accolades unless you're like Kafka who didn't get it while he was alive. But I feel like I went off a tangent. I forgot what I was trying to say. But it's that need for your legacy to pass on, which a lot of people are really diving into today because there's no such thing as, I mean, unless you're in a war-torn country or a place that it's really hard to get food, there's never been less people alive, percentage-wise, that haven't needed to fight for survival.
desires for well being, health, pleasure, and comfort, while our drive to propagate ourselves produces sexual desire and a striving for status, recognition, money, and fame. Or, as Schopenhauer states, the human being wills unconditionally to preserve his existence, wills it unconditionally free of pains, wills the greatest possible amount of well being, and wills every pleasure of which he is capable. In observing the behavior of other organisms, it is apparent that their essence, too, is defined by an endless striving for survival and reproduction. As Schopenhauer wrote, what nature aims at and attains in man is indeed essentially the same, and not more than what is also its goal in the brutes nourishment and propagation. Or, as he put it elsewhere, in the case of the plant, insect, animal, as well
So Schopenhauer blamed this will to live, we'll call it. He's not defining it as that, but that's what he's describing. Schopenhauer claimed that the will to live is what's responsible for the bad things that have happened throughout the ages. The people going to war across, oh well, I own the rights to this river, or I own the rights to this arbitrary land, and that sort of thing. That's really what
well
he's
as the
getting
human
at.
being, willing and striving constitute their entire essence. Schopenhauer went as far as to argue that a sort of proto willing and striving can be observed in the inorganic realm, for example, in the processes of gravitation, magnetism, and crystal formation, the elementary forces and energies that make up inorganic objects.
Think about Newton's laws. They apply to human beings as well. Inertia applies to human beings. Like if somebody's done something their entire life and you take that away from them and they can't do it anymore, they're going to resist. You know, for every action, there's an equal but opposite reaction. Guess what? It's human beings as well. You know, think of the rise of a tiny mustache guy after the Weimar Republic. Like that was a direct result of political instability, chaos, the Treaty of Versailles, and all these mitigating factors that led to people being fed up and, you know, subverting themselves to be under a dictator. Like, you know what I mean? It's like you can see all the laws of physics as well apply to the laws of human beings. And that's perhaps the most interesting facet of things that everything that occurs in the microcosm occurs in the macrocosm as well. Like, you know, you can apply Jungian psychology not just to the individual, but to the masses. You know, think of a man that's down and out on his luck. He'll see symbols like the Joker. He'll see, you know, destruction. He'll see uh, just tearing down everything. And then you can see that in mass in a society when things start to decay, that there's always the spirit for rebellion. There's always the riots. It's a cool phenomena, and once you see it, you kind of know it, and you can kind of understand the trends and understand where things are going. But I feel like there's so much carryover between a lot of these like scientific principles and I guess we'll call it metaphysical principles. Interesting enough, like the Gita and the Upanishads and a lot of like the Veda texts, they predict a lot of laws of physics, a lot of laws of quantum physics and all that sort of stuff.
He therefore proposed, share the
Consciousness. They
same inner
understood
nature as human
consciousness far
beings and
before
all
modern
other
science did.
organisms. Or as he wrote, now let us consider attentively and observe the powerful, irresistible impulse with which masses of water rush downwards, the persistence and determination with which the magnet always turns back to the North Pole, the keen desire with which iron flies to the magnet, the vehemence with which the poles of the electric current strive for reunion. If we observe all this, it will not cost us a great effort of the imagination to recognize once more our own inner nature, even at so great a distance.
The reason why he can tie all this together too is because this is well before the age of specialization. I feel like this is something I need to talk about much more. The reason why the world is the way it is because everyone specializes, is because everyone is a master at one thing but an idiot at everything else. Um, Look at Neil deGrasse Tyson try to talk politics or try to talk anything outside of his repertoire. It's not anything to scoff at. Same thing as Stephen A. Smith. He is the worst fence sitter I've ever seen. A man that has no principles that stands pretends to be. You know what I mean? It's like he's just working the crowd. He's not saying anything, and you know it's really the fault of the education system. It's really a fault of this like corporate world that pushes you to be one thing and not look at other things because you need a certain level of awareness of all things to create anything masterful. Think of the Renaissance churches, the Gothic churches. These were people that understood architecture but understood artistry as well. And you only get the beautiful churches if you have that artistry on top of that great craftsmanship and understanding of architecture. And it's that carryover, it's that meshing of these different ideas that creates new ideas. If you want to learn one skill that's going to set you apart from other people, learn how to tie things together. Learn how to see common trends. Learn how to see something in one expression and see it in another expression and apply that to a whole new work of creation. It's that critical thinking skill that we're kind of taught to abandon, and it's really quite unfortunate because a lot of like the scientific discoveries of the last 15 years purely would be avoided, like the incorrect ones would purely be avoided if people just took themselves just a step out of their own box and understood anything else about the world, understood any other implications. um Obviously a great example is the doctors that were telling people smoking cigarettes is good. Like, that was a consensus of the doctors. Like, you can't tell me that if they looked at these things objectively, if they looked at it beyond just the data that was telling them that it's probably not good to put black tar into your lungs, but who am I to say these things? You know what I mean?
Existence. It is that which in us pursues its ends by the light of knowledge, but here, in the feeblest of its phenomena, only strives blindly in a dull, one sided, and unalterable manner. As Schopenhauer concluded that all things in this world have willing and striving as their inner essence, he proposed that the ground of being, or foundational reality which transcends and manifests this world, is a metaphysical force which has endless willing and striving as its fundamental essence. He called this force the will to live, or simply the will, and in his words, the will is the being in itself of everything in the world, and is the sole kernel of
He's talking about the monad, the sole kernel of every phenomenon. So, like, summing up Spinoza very fastly and very not I really I'm not going to do it justice, but think of everything deriving from the same source. Everything at a fundamental level is built of the same building blocks. We're all just a combination of atoms in different expressions, and you know, our makeup of those atoms is so similar that we're basically the same on a certain level. And you can take this in different species, you could take this in different planets, you could use this example for absolutely everything. So Spinoza's idea is that we're all part of this grand cycle of we were once something else, we were once part of something bigger, we will soon be part of something else, we'll soon be part of something bigger, and we're just here in this large cycle of things. And you don't have to attach any metaphysical interpretations to this. This is really just the idea. It's like the Lion King, the circle of life.
every phenomenon, or as he further theorized, everything presses and strives towards existence. Let anyone consider this universal desire for life. Let him see the infinite willingness, facility, and exuberance with which the will to live presses impetuously into existence under a million forms everywhere and at every moment. In such phenomena, then, it becomes visible that I am right in declaring that the will to live is that which cannot be further explained, but lies at the foundation of all explanation.
Okay, so there's a part of the Tao Te Ching that says this. The Tao that can be explained is not the eternal Tao. And roughly speaking, Tao or Tao means it means like order. It means, you know, think of think of everything happening for a reason and everything cycling for a reason. We can think about like the water freezing and then it goes to the top of the mountain and then it freezes and then it eventually melts slowly and becomes rivers and then goes into the society and then people drink it and then it becomes moisture. It's that idea. It's things are happening on such a grand scale that we can't see the order of it, but there is an order of it. And there's the individual Tao, the individual Tao that is you living according to your own nature, you living according to your own uniqueness and your own um, sense of fulfillment. And then there's like the universal that is like people like to do certain things. People enjoy being out in nature. There's a calming presence. People, enjoy meditation. It allows their minds to be free. It allows their minds to not be slaves to ideas and certain, negative thoughts. And it can get extremely deep, but take it very simply. I feel like I confused a very simple point I was trying to make with something very philosophically and paradoxically.
While others have proposed that the ground of being which transcends and creates this world is conscious or intelligent, Schopenhauer described the will as unconscious, or as he put it is a blind impulse to live, to exist. Or as Christopher
So this is something from Hermetic philosophy. It's the idea that things are, and this is how I like to think about it. It might seem random, but things are working on such a grand scale you can't make sense of it. This is the book of Job as well. Um, I'll explain through Job because it's an easier explanation because it's a story. Job is a man that has everything. He has a great family, he has great riches, he has a great home. And, some people argue that the devil shouldn't be part of this story because it doesn't really make sense. It's not congruent with it. But the devil says that, can I test Job? And God says, sure, do whatever you want. So takes away his house, takes away his money, takes away his family, gives him boils on his skin, and he's this. shell of who he used to be, and then his friends try to tell him to ask God what he did and if he did anything wrong, and the entire time they're telling him to rebuke God because he basically what he was punished for something he didn't do, and his friends were like, this is not fair, but he refuses to do that. In the end, God restores everything to him plus more. And it's the idea that bad things happen to good people for no other reason than things are just occurring and things just happen, and it's just your responsibility to accept those things and move on with them.
Christopher Janaway further clarifies, the will, the world, manifests itself endlessly as individuals which endlessly strive. Nothing in the world strives or tends as it does for any ultimate reason. It is not to fulfill any rational purpose, or because there is a good end state to be attained, that plants or crystals grow, or that objects gravitate towards the earth. And since throughout nature the striving for existence is blind, not essentially mediated by consciousness, this must apply also to my essence. The true core of the personality is not the self conscious I or subject of knowledge, but rather the will, which is fundamentally blind and without knowledge. We each exist as an individual organism that blindly and for no good reason gravitates towards survival and sexual reproduction. The individual human being perseveres in living and has an urge to bring further individuals into life, but does not really know why.
I think this is a pretty good. I think it's a pretty good explanation of it. Hold on, I'll be right back. Oh, it's hurt. Oh, damn, my hips are killing me. So annoying because right as I start to get healthy, I feel like my body's just like, nope, we're not gonna do this. We're gonna give you some nagging injury. Like, I don't know if it's sciatica because like I was trying to sleep last night and like my hip, it just felt like nerve pain. It was awful. I literally had to wake up to stretch so I could go to sleep so it would go away. And the frustrating part about it too is it doesn't really hinder me at the gym or me training. So like it's not something I like need to address to keep going. So I'll just if it's not bothering me, I'll neglect it. Same thing with my shoulder, but my shoulder's getting really bad. How long have I been streaming for? Because I feel like this is hopefully gonna get more interesting when you change the video, but
As everything in this world is a manifestation of the will, Schopenhauer argued that individuality and separateness is an illusion. In reality, all is one, whereas the philosopher Frederick Coplestone
okay, so this is Spinoza's influence right here. All is one. Emerson agreed with this as well. It's not necessarily a metaphysical idea, it's just the idea that everything in some way is tied by the same motivation. It doesn't have to be that there's a religion behind it or a guiding force behind it. It's just that everything is alike in some fundamental ways. That's what he's talking about here.
wrote. Influenced by Indian thought, he read a Latin translation of a Persian version of the Upanishads. Schopenhauer declared that the multiplicity of phenomena is only appearance, Maya. They are the mere appearances of the one will, which is in truth the sole reality. Yet as
This
all
is the book
organisms
he
are
read.
trapped in the confines of Maya, instead of
He
perceiving all
also
as one, egoism is the natural
he also read the Gita as well, which is fairly similar in that sense. I don't know what's more complex. The Gita is like a story about a guy going to battle, and he doesn't want to kill the enemy, and he's just asking for general advice, and it talks about a whole lot of topics. It talks about a whole lot of things, and it's really, really well. Obviously, it's a 6,000-year-old text that's lasted to today. It's probably pretty good, but it's a really good read.
state. From its own perspective, every organism is situated at the center of the universe and instinctively feels that its own survival and well being is more important than the survival and well being of everything else. This disposition of egoism is essential to everything in nature, wrote Schopenhauer, or as he put it elsewhere, the human being makes himself the center of the world and considers his own existence and well being before everything else. In fact, from the natural standpoint, he is ready for this to sacrifice everything else. He is ready to annihilate the world in order to maintain his own self, that drop in the ocean, a little longer.
That's a really good way of putting it. What's up, Saida? Dude, I have not seen you in forever. Where you been? I say that as I haven't streamed in like 2 months.
As the resources needed for survival and reproduction are limited, in their state of egoism, all organisms are locked in constant conflict. As the ancient Greek philosopher Heraclitus put it, war is the father of all. To survive, every organism must kill and consume some other.
The only thing I know of Heraclitus, not much survives from him. I think we only know about him through. I can't. I think was it. It was. I don't know. No, it wasn't Socrates because Socrates doesn't write anything. It was probably Plato or. I wish I remembered off the top of my head, but we don't know a lot about him. We only know through him and his teachings through other people, which is similar to Socrates. But he was a pre-Platonic philosopher. He was no, he's pre-Pythagorean. That's that's really old. You were waiting. I streamed the past few days, but I've been streaming later because my head has been like killing me. So like I haven't been able to like think, let alone stream. But yeah, is this a good time or should I stream earlier? Because I honestly I feel like I could stream a few times a day because I don't have anything to do right now. But it's just a matter of getting up the energy to do it.
Life form, be it plant, insect, or animal, and in the competition to secure reproductive mates, violence and deception are the norm. As Schopenhauer put it, every organism competes with the others for matter, space, and time. It speaks to the genius of Schopenhauer that he penned his ideas nearly half a century before Charles Darwin spoke of the
Earlier,
struggle
please.
for
Okay.
existence and of the competition and conflict that drives natural and sexual selection. Or as Carl Jung wrote, Schopenhauer's philosophy was confirmed not only by the early observations I had made of diseased and dying fishes, of mangy foxes, frozen or starved birds, of the pitiless tragedies concealed in a flowery meadow, insects that tore each other apart piece by piece, and so
So cool that I have to reread Jung because I didn't read Schopenhauer before I read him. So I wonder like it'd be cool to see the influence. And as well with Faust as well. Because it's weird. So a lot of times I'll read books because I see it cited time and time again. So like with Faust, I really had never heard of it until I started reading Nietzsche or Jung or Schopenhauer or Freud. And after reading it, I was like, all right, I've seen it 100 times. I just need to pick it up for the sake of me at least getting these references because it was always something so profound and always something so insightful, and it was cool to finally get to read it. I probably should reread it again though. I don't remember anything from it.
on.
It's weird. Normally I remember at least a few things from everything I read. I don't really remember that much. I remember the overall plot. That's
My
it.
experiences with human beings, too, had taught me anything rather than belief in man's original goodness and decency. From our egoistic perspective, all this conflict and cruelty is the product of individual organisms preying upon one another. However, since every organism is a manifestation of the will, in reality, what is unfolding in this world is the one will pressing itself into existence under the guise of different life forms, only to then fight and feed on itself. The will must live on itself, wrote Schopenhauer, for there exists nothing beside it, and it is a hungry will. In this world, the will is both the hunter and the prey, the torturer and the tortured, the deceiver and the deceived, the killer and the
So what he's saying is the same force that is in all of us is the same thing that ultimately leads to our downfall, ultimately takes us away from this world. Which I think is extremely fascinating. The way this guy put it is really compelling.
killed, or as Julian Young writes, the world will is the perpetrator of all this horror, so it is evil. But since it is the world, it is also the victim of its own evil. It bears all the suffering it itself creates. Since every part of the world is part of the world organism, every time an animal sinks its teeth in the flesh of another, the world will sinks its teeth in its own flesh. As this world is full of so much cruelty,
So this is a common argument you hear against God is that, well, if God is good, then why is there evil in this world? And I don't think this is really that deep of a question because it's like the only reason we can understand good is because we understand evil. And it doesn't like you can't have one without the other. There's no light without dark. It's the paradox that creates everything. And that's really what this idea is that for there to be any story, there has to be conflict. There has to be for life to happen, there has to be birth and death. And it's like there's just a fundamental paradox that you can never overcome.
cruelty, evil, and suffering, the idea
It's
that it
a
was
weird
created by a moral
painting.
and loving God is, for Schopenhauer, absurd. The will, wrote Schopenhauer, is not divine but demonic. Although the will is a blind and amoral force and not a being, if one were to personify it as a deity, one would, in the words of Schopenhauer, have to admit that a god who should presume to transform himself into such a world would certainly have been inevitably troubled and tormented by the devil. Or as he continued, for whence did Dante get the material for his hell, if not from this actual world of ours? The world is hell, and men are on the one hand the tormented souls, and on the other the devils in it. But it is not only in the
Okay, hold on. And men are on one hand tormented souls, and on the other is the devil's in it. So what he's saying is the system. Think like we have to go to war to defend democracy, but then in essence we're creating a new batch of enemies. Or we have to revolt and create a government that's more fair, but we created a government that infringes on people's rights inherently. It's the fact that there's no such thing as solutions, and it's the fact that there's no such thing as any sort of action that is free in this world. You're always in some way affecting others. You're always in some way creating a problem that you're going to have to solve in the future. And it's interesting because he's setting up Schopenhauer's real solution here, Schopenhauer's real point of everything, and it's to get beyond the will. It's to get beyond this need for anything. It's to understand that you don't have to participate in the violence, in the cycles, in the way of things. As Patrice O'Neill said, it's like you're in the belly of the beast. You're part of the thing. You're part of the problem. Like, it's like these celebrities that are talking out about social issues. It's like you're directly responsible for a lot of them. It's very weird. I find your own state of mind and perception has a lot to do with whether you see the world as hell or heaven. It's really not. It's really nothing in its own. What do you mean by that? Because I just clarify a little bit because I don't want to take you out of context. I don't.
from this actual world
You know
of
what I
ours.
mean?
The world is hell, and men are on the one hand the
Before I
tormented
speculate
souls,
on
and on
it.
the other the devils in it. But it is not only in the struggle to survive and reproduce that the wretchedness of life presents itself. For in our daily existence, the endless striving and desiring that constitutes the essence of our being predestines us to suffer. Every desire is an expression of something we want, need, or lack, and thus every desire is accompanied by some degree of dissatisfaction, frustration, or pain. If we fail to satisfy a desire, it continues
So think of Buddha's idea as all suffering comes from desire, and that's really Schopenhauer's understanding. He says once you get away from the need to be compelled by the will, then it no longer subverts your actions into detrimental actions. Once you get beyond yourself, the world just is, it's our perception. Okay, yeah, I agree with that.
used to make us suffer. But if we satisfy it, our only reward is a brief period of respite before other desires arise to fill the temporary void. But even in those rare moments we exist absent any desire, instead of experiencing peace of mind, all too often we experience anxiety, unrest, or boredom. Because we are at essence beings who endlessly desire and strive, lasting satisfaction or happiness is an impossibility. Suffering and dissatisfaction is our default state. Or as Schopenhauer explained, all willing springs from lack, from deficiency, and thus from suffering. Fulfillment brings this to an end, yet for one wish that is fulfilled, there remain at least 10
All willing spread springs from lack. All suffering comes from desire. Okay. He's literally just quoting Buddha here, and he's just trying to code it in a philosophical lens so that you don't call him a mystic. But secretly, Schopenhauer is a mystic. He is very much influenced by Meister Eckhart and the more esoteric side of Christianity, as well as Eastern philosophy. There's a Hamlet quote: "Nothing is either good or bad, but thinking makes it so." Yes, no, that's dude. Shakespeare had such a way of splicing those prophetic ideas into his works. I mean, you look at a lot of his works; they're fairly simplistic, but they're extremely deep in ways as well. I really need to reread some of his stuff because, like, I read it when I was a lot younger, so I don't think I had the same appreciation for it, and also I wasn't as well versed at understanding um philosophical and symbolic representation. So it's like I really it wouldn't have clicked even if I paid more attention when I read it. But man, I read Hamlet. That's something tremendous. I really need to start rereading all those like Greek tragedies as well. Because I read Oedipus and I read Oedipus Rex. But there's two of them. There's one where he's the king, and then there's one of the aftermath of his death with his daughter. I don't remember what happens exactly.
That are denied. Further, desiring lasts a long time. Demands and requests go on to infinity. Fulfillment is short and meted out sparingly. But even the final satisfaction itself is only apparent. The wish fulfilled at once makes way for a new one. No attained object of willing can give satisfaction that lasts and no longer declines. Therefore,
No attained object of willing can give satisfaction that lasts and no longer declines. Think of, the Bible says the love of money is evil. The love of things is evil because it makes you want more and more and more and more and more. Like, think of Bezos. Bezos will never be able to retire, never be able to relax because he's obsessed with things. The less attached you are to things, the less you need things, the happier you are. Think of the most happy moments in your life. Are you worried about the things that you have? Are you worried about the things that you don't have? Are you thinking about the past or the future, or are you purely present? That's really the secret to happiness. That's really the secret to fulfillment. It's understanding that you hold the key to your happiness. Understanding that if you're okay with yourself, that's all you need in this world.
apparent, the wish fulfilled at once makes way for a new one. No attained object of willing can give satisfaction that lasts and no longer declines. Therefore, so long as our consciousness is filled by our will, so long as we are given up to the throng of desires with its constant hopes and fears, so long as we are the subject of willing, we never obtain lasting happiness or peace.
Seeking things externally is what he's talking about. So trying to find things outside of yourself for the sake of making yourself happy. Um, I want you to think about it like this, like why do people seek power? Why do people seek fame? Why do people seek recognition? Purely what it is there's a deficiency in your self image. You don't like yourself. You don't feel good about yourself. You don't feel like you're worthy or capable, whatever it is. And you believe that if you go out into the world and have other people praise you, then it'll prove to yourself that you're worthy of love. It'll prove to yourself that you should feel happy about yourself. It's really sad when you break it down to that, and it's really sad because all of this striving could have just been solved if you just looked at yourself in the mirror and said, you know what, I like myself. It's so funny.
To make our situation even worse, the final goal which
What is
awaits
this
us in this
picture?
perpetual cycle of desiring and striving is death, be it by the slow decay of our mind and body or an unexpected illness or accident. Seen as a whole, even the best lived life is a tragedy. Life is deeply steeped in suffering, and we cannot escape from it, writes Schopenhauer. Our entrance to it takes place amid tears. At bottom, its course is always tragic, and its end is even more so. For those who resonate with this pessimistic vision of the world and the human condition, Schopenhauer advised there is only one thing to do. We must remove ourselves from the cycle of endless desiring and striving that
So that's really the misunderstanding is that people read Schopenhauer and they're like, this guy was depressed, this guy was out there. And he's what he's saying is the way we live our lives is depressing. The way the majority of people go through this world and think that there will be an end, that think that there will eventually one day be a time where they don't have problems, where they don't have stress. That's his belief. It's that nothing will ever be solved. You need to solve it for yourself. You need to get yourself out of the state where these things matter to you. Think about it this way, like there's always that advice when you're getting bullied that like if you just ignore it, the bullies will stop. And it is true in that sense, but like the more you pay attention to something, the more it becomes a problem, the more it bothers you. But if you don't you view something as a problem, if it doesn't get to your head, if the insults don't mean anything to you, then it has no power over you. And that's what he's saying. Remove the power of the world from your self-image. Remove the power of the world from your consciousness, from your awareness, for your ideas. Isn't striving good then? No, no. So I see where you're misunderstanding. He's talking about how do I say this? Like art for the sake of art is not striving. Like if you're inspired, if you are, you're like, I really want to create this thing, perfect. But it's like when you create something for the sole purpose of other people liking you, or other people appreciating you, then you miss the plot. That's the idea of it. It's when it's authentic, when it's coming from the heart, when it's done for your own expression, perfectly fine. But when it's done for the sake of someone else, that's when it is destroyed. That's really what he's saying.
that condemns us to a life of suffering. One way to do this is through aesthetic appreciation. For when we experience something beautiful, be it a work of art, a natural landscape, a song, or a philosophical idea, we are temporarily torn away from our egotistical preoccupation with desire, and for a brief time liberated from our default dissatisfied state. Or as Schopenhauer wrote in The World is Will and Representation, aesthetic pleasure in the beautiful consists, to a large extent, in the fact that we are raised for the moment above all willing, above all desires and cares. We are, so to speak, rid of ourselves. And we know that these moments, when, delivered from the fierce pressure of the will, we emerge, as it were, from the heavy atmosphere of the earth, are the most blissful that we experience. From this, we can infer how blessed must be the life of a man whose will is silenced not for a few moments, as in the enjoyment of the beautiful, but forever, indeed completely extinguished, except for the
So what he's saying here, it doesn't even have to be something extremely aesthetic. It's just paying attention to the little things, appreciating the little things. This is really the genius that is Walden, is that Henry David Thoreau went out into the woods, not really for the purpose of becoming a monk, not really for the purpose of living amongst nature, but for the experience of resettling the things that he valued most. You know, if you have 100 cars, can you appreciate any of them? Versus if you have one car that gets you from A to B, that it never breaks down, it's always reliable, it's not expensive. Like that's a car you can appreciate. That's a car that you value. It's the same thing with tools. If you have 1,000 tools, if one breaks, you're going to get extremely mad. But if they all work perfectly and you just have a handful of them, then you appreciate it. The less you have, the more you can appreciate, and especially the closer you are to the bare minimum, that's happiness. And when you could recenter yourself in that moment, when you can start saying, you know what, I have all these things going wrong, but I also have all these blessings. And when you can start to refocus yourself and become more on the positive end of things, then it's a lot easier to feel these feeling states. It's like the saying that your happiest moments are those in which you forget yourself. Yes, yes. That's exactly. Why didn't you just say this 5 minutes ago before I went in that example? Come on.
last glimmering spark that
Sahita, where are you here to help me? Like, come on. Like, I don't want to have to go into all these explanations.
maintains the body and is extinguished with it. If you would like to support our work, become an AOI supporter
Ah,
member and access over 100 videos
that's a pretty good
exclusive to
video.
members.
Again, I
Sign up
feel
for
like we've been reacting to this channel a lot recently. It's a really good channel. Give them a subscription or watch some of their videos sometime because I do enjoy going through because it makes it really easy for me to go off on tangents and talk about the things I want to talk about. Anybody got any questions or anything before I go? I have a little bit more time, but if nobody has anything that they want to talk about, I need to. I don't know. Today I have some stuff I gotta do, but I gotta do a stream where I don't have anything afterwards, so that I can just go on for hours and hours and hours. I'm trying to think of the longest stream I ever did. It was something around 5 hours, and I look back and I'm like, I don't know how I had the energy for that. Does this guy have any short videos? Because if there's like a 4 minute video, we could definitely go through it. But we're not gonna be able because I have like 30 minutes before I have to leave. So there's 10 minutes. Um, I'm only sweating right now. All right, this seems interesting. Is that 1.5? That's the only way we
man
can get
cannot
through it.
discover new oceans unless he has the courage to lose sight of the shore. Marie Louise
Keep missing this quote. Man cannot discover the new oceans unless he has the courage to lose sight of the shore. You think of the trickster archetype, the idea that basically someone told me recently counter existentialism is absurdism. Yeah, if you like absurdism, go read the Tao Te Ching because it's absurdism with a more positive outlook. But I think absurdism is super interesting and super fascinating because, existentialism is the idea that we can assign value to things through our own meaning, which really isn't true because you look at most potter, most postmodernists are existentialists in a sense, and they've never really created anything that's long lasting. They've never really created anything that's inspirational. It's always been a slow degeneration of the old archetypal images, and they've never really found anything to replace it with. Whereas absurdism kind of lambasts that whole idea that you can destroy something and create something new. The truth about it is every accomplishment, everything you've ever done, every step that you ever took on this world will eventually be washed away, will eventually just become, non-existent. And the only thing that matters is the time that you spent. The only thing that you can ever say you did is the things that you did. And this is a paralyzing thought for many people. And it's a paralyzing idea that, like, in the grand scheme of things, there'll be a day and age where people forget Jesus, where people forget, you know, Genghis Khan, where people like everyone you ever know, every great person throughout history, every accomplishment they ever did will eventually one day be washed away. And this is like ultimately really freeing or ultimately really scary. But the freedom of this is that you can act with impunity. You can act and do whatever you want, and there's nothing you have to live up to. There's nothing you have to do. You don't have to be a productive member of society. You don't have to fit the mold. You don't have to go work a job and do this and do that. You don't have to have a family. You don't have to get a white picket fence and a white, like, you know what I mean? You don't have to do anything. And that's the ultimate freedom because that allows you to follow who you really are. That allows you to become who you really are. It's really, I hate that people don't find this idea inspiring because if there was a set meaning to life, then it would mean there's no meaning. If you had to wake up every day and strive to become a doctor or a lawyer, it would be so boring because you know your whole life that's what you have to do. You have this responsibility. You have to wake up every day and work towards this goal. If you don't have to do anything then you can follow your own path. And that's the true meaning of freedom. That's the true meaning of life. Is that idea. Why would it be scary? It's comforting to me. It's scary to people that haven't accepted responsibility for things. So if nothing matters, then why did you do everything in your life? Think about it like that. If nothing can provide you value, if nothing can provide you meaning, then how could you ever be happy? You know, it's this is something that John Paul Sartre, I don't know how to say it. He says that, when you understand what existentialism really is, or absurdism in this sense, it's a lot of people reject it because they don't want to accept that they have the ultimate responsibility for their lives. That they don't want to take responsibility for the way their life has gone because it's much easier to put your head in the sand and ignore the reality of the world than actually see things and see the mistakes you made. That's really what it comes down to. And for a lot of people, a lot of people need to believe in something. A lot of people need to have something to shoot for and need a hero. You know what I mean? Like, think about the people that idolize politicians. Think about the people that idolize fictional characters. Think about the people that try to embody characteristics of their favorite celebrity. That's somebody who doesn't want to become themselves. That's somebody who wants to become something that they are not. And would you want the reality that these symbols, that these ideas, that these idealized versions of the people that you see aren't really true and will not stand the test of time? I mean, that's a scary idea for a lot of people.
Marie-Louise von Franz, a Swiss psychologist, noticed a disturbing trend in the mid-20th century. Many men and women who were well into their adult years remained psychologically stunted in their maturation. They occupied the bodies of adults, but their mental development failed to keep pace. Von Franz saw this as such a pressing issue that in 1959 she gave a series of lectures on the psychology of the puer aeternus, which is Latin for eternal child. While originally this term was used in mythology to refer to a child god who remains forever young,
Think of the modern day trend of suspending adulthood. Um, think of the Disney adults, the people that go to a children's amusement park and spend thousands of dollars to feel like they're still children because they don't want to accept the reality of the world. They don't want to accept the responsibility of the world. And, it might seem as a good thing to not accept responsibility, but when you don't accept responsibility, then you can't grow. And I'm not saying like you have to get a mortgage, you have to be contributing. I'm saying like there's a certain reality that you must accept that your life is determined by your actions. Your life is congruent with all of the decisions you've ever made in your life. And if you prolong that and you push it onto the government and you push it onto this group or you push it on that group, it's all a rejection of adulthood. It's all a rejection of your responsibility to take what has happened to you and grow and make the most of it. And if you don't take that responsibility, then you can never become the person you were meant to be. Um, Jung said something extremely interesting where he's like, when you have a child, it changes something in you. It makes you grow up. It sparks some maturity that's basically forced upon you because you're no longer just responsible for yourself or, the people in your extended family. You're directly responsible for the upbringing of this life that is solely reliant on you. And it's extremely interesting. And I wonder if we would see these same trends, these same like, think about like Pokemon, like literal kids can't buy Pokemon cards because you have full-grown adults scalping the ticket or the cards. And it's like, what? Obviously, there's the monetary aspect of it, but like, why are adults buying these cards for thousands of dollars? It's all a prolonging of adulthood. It's all a inability to take responsibility. Think about like the games that are like, oh, you have a second life, or think about like Fortnite or all these other games. You can be a hero in the game, but you're not a hero in real life. It doesn't really take that much time, energy, and effort to become somewhat of a success, somewhat of a stable, functioning, responsible adult in this world. But it takes a thrusting off of the childhood like state that people don't want to get rid of. You know what I mean? You always want your parents bailing you out. You always want the government bailing you out. You want your mistakes to be handled by someone else instead of handling them yourself, so you'll never get past that. My favorite line from a song is "All memories made will wash away." It might sound pessimistic. No, that's a pretty good quote. It's good to cater to your inner child. And I'm not saying that avoid your inner child. I'm not saying any of that stuff. I'm saying when it's a mass trend of people going to Disney and like crying like little kids, like that's that's indicative of a much larger problem. Don't get me wrong, I still like Kung Fu Panda, like Despicable Me is a good movie, but like it's not my end all be all. You know what I mean? And I understand the importance of being a child at heart, having that curious like nature, having that innocent response to the world and freedom to see things from a blank slate, because that's really where creativity springs from. But I'm talking more so much about the people that don't take responsibility for the things that happen to them and the things that they have happened to them as a result of their actions and a result of their decisions, is really what I'm saying.
Young, her teacher Carl Jung had adopted the term for psychological purposes to describe the individual who, like Peter Pan, fails to grow up. In one of her lectures, von Franz describes the puer aeternus as the individual who remains too long in adolescent psychology. That is, all those characteristics that are normal in a youth of 17 or 18 are continued into later life, coupled in most cases with too great a dependence on the mother. Von Franz predicted that in the coming decades, what she called the problem of the puer aeternus would spread across the world and affect more and more individuals. Her predictions have proven remarkably accurate, especially among the male population of the Western world. Many young men are struggling academically, socially, spiritually, financially, and sexually. They are living at home into their late 20s and 30s, choosing to remain in the comforting confines of their parents' care.
And I don't think this is necessarily a bad thing to live with your parents or spend time with your parents, but it's a bad thing when it's the only option you have and when you're not trying to do anything. Because I mean, there's some truth to the saying the idle hands are the work of the devil. It's if you're not doing anything, it's gonna, you know, wreak havoc on your development and wreak havoc on who you become. And it's sad because it's like the exact reason why these guys are struggling with all of these problems is because they're not stepping outside the home. They're not trying to do anything.
rather than testing the unknown waters of independence. Instead of striving to create something of themselves, many prefer the familiar and comfortable virtual worlds of internet pornography and video games. They are passive wanderers in life with no path or purpose, save the pursuit of momentary pleasure to ease their suffering. Based on the scope of this problem, it would not be far-fetched to claim that the problem of the pure eternus is the primary neurosis of the modern age. The purpose of this course is to provide an antidote to those who suffer from this problem. To do this, we are going to provide an in-depth psychological analysis of the pure eternus and building.
Okay, so what he's going to say is you need to embrace the trickster archetype. And broadly speaking, the trickster archetype is the think of the comedian or think of the person that's new to a new hobby. It's the person that is playing around with the darker elements, that's playing around with the insecurity, that's playing around with the parts of themselves that they don't always let slip. And through the course of this, you start to become a master, then you start to become the hero, then you start to become the enlightened wizard or the old man archetype. It's think of your progression as the characters in a story, and that's really what you should start to embody. Like, you know, before you can get out of the house, you need to start playing around with the idea of getting out of the house. Before you become an expert at something, you have to start playing around with the idea that you could become an expert at it. You have to start going out there and trying and failing. And the ability to be rejected, the ability to fail is really the key to getting yourself out of this. If you're so afraid to start something new, then you'll never get out of this childlike stage. You'll never progress past the need for your parents or the need for the government or the need for someone else to bail you out of the situation. You need to accept failure, accept the trial and error, and eventually expand your capabilities to the point where you can do something outside of what you thought was possible. That's really the solution to this. And broadly speaking, it's this is why you see the Joker is so popular today. Because what the Joker is the Joker is really the failed trickster archetype. It's the trickster, it's the comedian that did not did not play around with the darker elements and expand beyond that. It's they play around the darker elements and embrace the darkness instead of moving into something more productive, instead of seeing that, there's a light at the end of the tunnel. If I just keep on hope, it's the nihilistic youth that is kind of being embodied through that symbol. And it's really detrimental. It's so weird to me how many people have the Joker as their avatar online. And it's like, maybe it's just someone that's a fan of it, but it's gotten to the point where I feel like people try to embody some of it. It's kind of, I wouldn't say necessarily scary. I'm not one of those people that like fear mongers about, oh, we need to watch what's in the movies. It's like if it's made it to the movies, then it's already too late because culture is a reflection of the unconscious forces that are acting in society. And if society is embracing these elements unconsciously, then it's a much deeper problem than just a movie could be. Think of the westerns. The westerns are really an embodiment of the spirit and the a lot of them were happening during the 60s, and it was really that rebellious spirit that was going on at the time. Am I making sense? Because I feel like I'm talking about archetypes and I'm simplifying it in my head, but I don't know if I'm explaining them enough.
On insights from Carl Jung, Soren Kierkegaard, von Franz, and others, provide practical advice on how to commence on a more responsible, enriching, successful, and independent life path. Before we examine the psychology of the pure eternus, it is necessary to take note of the conditions which have given rise to this social problem. And toward this end, we must discuss how a strong mother complex stunts the maturation of many today. For as von Franz notes, a man who has a mother complex will always have to contend with his tendencies toward becoming a pure eternus. Throughout our evolutionary history, the mother and father have assumed different parental roles. Mothers have always interacted with their children more than fathers. They maintain more physical contact and are more nurturing, comforting, and empathetic to the physical and emotional pains and needs of the child. This extremely
Jordan Peterson always talks about the devouring mother archetype, the devouring mother idea, which is basically the overbearing mother, the tiger mom, the mother that controls everything about their child. And if you have this type of mother, you're generally going to need a girlfriend that is completely micromanaging your life, is completely controlling your life, and it's going to be very, very difficult to deal with that, especially as an individual in this modern day and age.
intimate and close relationship with the mother figure creates in the child a lasting emotional mark, or a highly resistant psychological bond psychologists call a mother complex. The child's experience of the mother, writes James Hollis, is internalized as a complex, an emotionally charged cluster of energy beyond the control of the ego. Fathers do not create the same bond of dependency with the child. Instead, their role has traditionally been to provide the developing child with.
So think about the Oedipus complex. The way to so a lot of early development in male psychology is simplify it to the Oedipus complex. You want to kill your father, which means you want to outdo their accomplishments, and you want to marry your mother. That means you want to fall in fall in love with someone that embodies your mother in terms of the traits, the characteristics. Some people say physical appearance. I don't think that's quite true. My girlfriend does not look like my mother. They're different skin colors, but it's it's really like the kind of support you get, the kind of nagging you get, the kind of characteristics will very much align. And the truth about relationships is if you don't have a good relationship with these traits, if you don't give yourself these traits, if you don't give yourself the support or the characteristics you're looking for first, you're not going to get them in anyone else because no one can fill that void. And really, the way to move on from the devouring mother is to accept the responsibility for yourself. So, like, if your mother still does your laundry, you got to start doing your laundry. If your mother cuts the crust off your cheese, you got to cut the damn crust off your cheese. If your mother cooks your food, you got to start cooking for yourself. It's taking on that responsibility. It's taking away that need to be nurtured that's going to get you out of this thing. But for many people, it's too late, and for many people, they never notice that this is really the problem. Anti-heroes are more popular than actual heroes sometimes. Yeah, well, I mean, the reason why anti-heroes are so popular today is because we live in like a very heavily postmodern influenced society. So like it's it's not interesting to have perfect heroes in many people's eyes. It's not interesting to have like like Superman or the Lord of the Rings, and there's like this conception that these stories are boring, and I think it's incorrect because I think you could tell a compelling story regardless. But it really shows. So the obsession with shows like Dexter, shows like Breaking Bad or The Sopranos. The truth of it is that think about the corporate world. The corporate world is so perfect. It's on its face is so nice and accepting and diverse and all of these cute buzzwords. But in reality, it's brutal. In reality, to make it to the top, you need to do some evil things. And the media is purely portraying that darker side of humanity. And because it's not being expressed in everyday life, it's being expressed through the media. So think about how popular true crime is. Think about how popular, you know, these mass government conspiracy theories are. Think about all of these darker elements of society. People are so obsessed with it is because they're not seeing this reflected in the everyday life. There used to be a day and age where there was war. There used to be a day and age where this need for darkness was fulfilled through just existing because life was so hard. But because we don't have that, that's really the trend. And again, it's a lot of mitigating factors, but that's probably the main reason.
Resources and protection, but just as importantly with guidance. More specifically, the role of the father has been to help the child break free from their bond of dependency with the mother, and so help him emerge into the world as an independent and functional adult. In most cultures throughout history, individuals transitioned from adolescence to adulthood with the help of initiatory rites of passage. The primary goal of all initiatory rites of passage, cross-culturally, was to separate the youth from his mother, first physically and then psychologically. These rites were performed shortly after the onset of puberty, and were instituted solely by the elder males of the tribe, the cultural fathers. Women were generally banned from observing or.
So think about this, like what is the rites of passage for young men? At what point are we able to accept responsibility? At what point are we able to feel like we're our own person? Particularly in the West, it was generally when you had a family, when you had a home. And guess what? It's never been harder than ever. Like terrible houses are now going for millions of dollars, depending where you live in the country, and it's impossible to get a loan. You have these hedge funds that are buying up all these properties because they can leverage their debt against, the individual buyer who doesn't have as much leverage. And it's really like the things that used to make you a man are so far out of the reach that there's never been less people that feel like they're men. And of course, violent crime is going up. Of course, all these other issues are going up because men don't have this rite of passage. They don't feel like they are coming into their own. And if I have a problem, I'm going to take that on someone else. That's just basic Newton's laws. I feel like we should know how things work.
Participating in these rituals. A typical rite of passage, as explained by Mircea Eliade in his book Rites and Symbols of Initiation, proceeded as follows. In the middle of the night, the cultural fathers of
Okay, the rites of passage don't have to be something extreme. A lot of times the rites of passage were like very brutal. A lot of times they were something difficult. And while there is some sort of difficult challenge, I think it can also be merely symbolic. So like think of graduating college or, if you're Jewish, like what is it, the bar, bat mitzvah, I don't know which one's which. Um, but these sort of traditions, because what traditions stand for is it's a transition. It's a period of now you can take on more responsibility. Now we're going to treat you differently. But because people aren't being treated differently well into their 30s, well into their 40s, they're not going to act differently. Think about it like that. You don't have any reason to grow if you're not forced to grow. If you don't fail, if you don't try and come up short, then what reason do you have to get better? What reason do you have to improve? What reason do you have to try something different, to become a different human being? And that's really what this all comes down to. There's no incentive to do these things. There's no reason. You're being coddled and you're being, treated like these things don't matter and will never happen. So why are you going to even prepare for them? With that said, I'm gonna have to go because I gotta go do something. Thank you guys so much for being here. Yeah, hopefully we have another good stream tomorrow. I'm gonna try to stream a little bit earlier. I might stream twice, if we're lucky. But yeah, thank you guys so much for being here. Love you guys so much. Peace out. I'll catch you in the next one.